If you're working with any brand and you want to work as like an influencer, content creator type thing, then obviously you have to put in the work. The content has to exist. You have to have some form of proof of concept before that they'll start working with you. But in terms of working with a brand in the way that I work with Sony, a lot of it's to do with technical understanding and then education. Am I the best landscape photographer? No. Am I the best wedding photographer? Gosh, no. But do I understand all the technical elements, and do I have the experience to be able to like ignite a passion in someone that they can then grow with? That's like you understanding how to shoot manual. You know kind of what they do, but you're just swapping the numbers in and out and hoping it works. Whereas when you truly understand it, then you can start opening up more and more avenues. All I do is photography and workshops and video, and that is my personal brand, and that's fine. But I think it's also important to not neglect the other parts of your life that you really enjoy that maybe don't get seen on social media.
If you're a creative who wants to learn more about brand deals, or if you love traveling and outdoor landscape photography, then you're going to love today's guest, because Clyde Vaughan does exactly that. Clyde's a Sydney-based photographer and filmmaker, and through his brand partnerships, he's been able to travel to places like Antarctica and Japan, hosting groups of creatives looking to network and learn more about the technical aspects of photography. In this episode, Clyde shares how he's been able to work with these bigger brands and build a career based off of all the things that he loves. So if you're looking to learn more about brand deals and how to work with these bigger companies, or if you just love travel and outdoor photography, then this one's for you. Clyde shares a lot in this episode, so as always, if you do find some value in this, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Your support means the world, and it really does go a long way to help growing this channel. I can't wait to share this episode, and I really do hope you guys get a lot out of this. So let's get into it. There's this guy called Pat. Pat's a train driver, right? Pat's a train driver, but he doesn't want to be a train driver.
Okay.
He wants to be a photographer.
Yeah, okay.
Right? But he doesn't know how to do it. He's stuck driving trains because he just doesn't know right, how to break into the industry. He doesn't know how to start.
Yeah.
When you talk or when you give advice, I'm like, Damien, you're talking to Pat. It's for Pat. It's not for me. Because there are times he's like, I just throw in like, you know, the 50 mil. I'm like, Pat doesn't know what that is. Do you know what I mean?
Really break it down.
Yeah. Do you know? So a lot of the time, that's what I found helpful for me. You would do great at these because I assumed before starting this, I'm like, he's going to do great because he does these workshops. You're almost you do these one-on-one talks.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And a lot of the times it's people asking similar questions, right?
I think one thing that there's like two types of photographers. There's the people that have the creative vision, like they can manifest something in their head and be like, this is how I want it to look and feel.
Yes.
And then they have to either find the people in the industry that can make it happen.
Yes.
These people generally become creative directors or producers even. And then you have the other side, which is like the really technical people that understand the look and vision, but they don't necessarily come up with it on their own. They need inspiration. And I'm in that second camp. Like, if I go to a shoot, I need to look and read the light, and then I decide on the technical choices. And I understand all the technical choices, whereas some people, they can build that and create that before they even arrive at the location. So I always find like it's funny where I want people to get technical with me, but I'm fully aware that not everyone wants me to be technical back to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So
they don't understand. Like, how did you get to the point to even learn all these things? Because I'm sure when you first, how long have you been doing this for?
12 years, 14 years.
Yeah. So back 12 years ago, you wouldn't have known a lot of this. Yeah.
I think YouTube's probably the place where you build the foundations for everything. So you learn a lot of the technical stuff, but really, the big difference for me is instead of critiquing other people's work and trying to draw out, how do they do this? Find the parts of your own work that you like and then just reincorporate that every time. So say you have 3 images and you like one thing about 3 of those images. You don't like the overall image, but you like 3 things about one thing about each of those 3.
Yep.
And then the 4th photo you take, you are incorporating those 3 things that you like, and that will elevate the standard of work. And then that's what gives you that technical understanding, because you're not just doing one technique. You're going, how can I employ multiple techniques in one image? And that's overall what makes you develop as a photographer, a filmmaker, content creator, even graphic designer. It's you're picking the parts that you already like and then just reintroducing them more and more and more frequently. It's like going to the gym. You got to put the reps in.
Yeah, of course. And I think a lot of people, I myself fall into the trap of like watching a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, same.
And you
definitely.
feel like you're learning a lot, and you
Yeah.
are. But I think, what do you think is more important, like watching those tutorials or actually going out and doing the work?
It depends what it is. So like I watched a lot of tutorials when you're like, oh, how do I do a speed ramp? Or how do I do this? And there's those small technical things that maybe it's a toggle in Premiere or one button in DaVinci or like something in Lightroom that you just don't understand. And then you watch a couple of videos on it and you go, all right, sweet, I've got it now. But I think really, like I said, putting those reps in is going to benefit you more in the long term. But then also critiquing your own work and then finding someone, like having a good mentor, or at least someone that you look up to and you kind of want to emulate that style. I mean, you know, mimicry is the greatest form of flattery. So if you see someone using techniques that you use, or someone who edits a lot like you, or you're kind of building that personal brand and you're understanding where the aesthetic direction your photography, your filmmaking is heading, then you can start to kind of take bits and pieces. You know, you're like, oh, do I really like symmetry? Yes. Or do I actually, you know what? I don't like wide angle. And then you can lean into something else. And I think that's a healthy thing. And to change. So don't just find it and then stick with it, because then 10 years down the road, you're going to be sick of your own work. So I think part of that for me is just constantly, it's going to sound bad, but just constantly changing gear and changing lenses.
Okay.
So, you know, some people are working towards building that perfect kit, then that's it, and they tell themselves they'll never buy anything again. But for me, I buy and sell quite regularly, and it's also part of the reason is I don't want to.
Is it more to upskill?
Yeah, but also, so I don't become stagnant. You don't just go, oh, you know what, I'm going to live on a 24/70 for the rest of my career because it just does everything.
That's
because then eventually you're just going to find that everything in your work sits between that focal range.
Yeah, true.
So I find, you know, getting access to gear, or just not even just gear, just different techniques, different locations, different everything, that is going to force you to become better.
Yeah, correct. I agree. You were talking before about having mentors, and I've heard you say in the past, like if you were to start again, you'd probably latch on to people who are more successful or doing something that you want to do. Yeah.
So I'm already laughing at that question because I get a lot of messages asking people wanting to shoot with me or for me.
Okay, yeah, cool.
But I always feel quite bad because like I'm not in a position to really hire people. Like my personal brand's quite small. I'm not at the point where I'm scaling my business a lot. Like it is just me, and I'm really enjoying that process. Yeah. So I get a lot of messages asking like, oh, I'd love to shoot with you, or like, oh, I'd love to be, just want to hang out. And I always feel really bad when I have to shoot them down.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the important thing is, like you said, find someone that you really admire, whether that's, that could be from a multitude of reasons. It could be business, skill set, even just personality. You think, the way I see it is, you know, if they're going places, you find someone that you like, get along with, and they're going somewhere. If you're attached to them, you're going too.
I think my biggest hurdle in the beginning, like trying to create my own sort of business, was not having people to latch onto. I felt like my biggest struggle was I've got to figure everything out on my own, and this has taken me way longer than I know it should if someone had just told me how to do it right the first time. Yeah. And that was my biggest, I guess, struggle. I'll still struggle with it now. How would you, if you were starting out, how would you go about trying to find a mentor or be around the right person?
Yeah, I think finding someone in the industry, that could be through social media or just word of mouth or something like that. I think that's probably the most valuable tool, especially someone who's producing work that not everyone else is producing. So if you see, you know, you're really into street photography, there's a huge street photography community in Sydney. I'm not trying to discredit anyone in any way, shape or form. But because, you know, we're all shooting the same locations, a lot of the work starts to look very similar. And so if you found someone that's doing something very different, regardless of their skill set, latch onto them, get to know them, get to know why they're doing things differently, and then grow together. Yeah. But I will say that a shameless plug. So I'm part of a group of people that work with Sony called Sony Scene. So we're Sony advocates. And we work as contractors, but our role is basically to facilitate and grow the photo and filmmaking community in Australia and New Zealand. And if that had existed when I started, I guarantee you I would have learned a lot faster. Because for me, when I build these events, it is part of my business, but a large part of it is how can I create something and give access to a genre or a style or a location that people don't have access to in day-to-day life.
Yep.
So I started shooting portraits just on the street, all natural light, but and I only learnt Flash in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
So what if when I started 10 years ago, what if there was a platform where I could get access to a studio and professional talent and learn that stuff earlier? And that's part of why I really wanted to be a part of that program.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's almost what I was getting at. I was like, these workshops that I see you guys running, I had Joanne on last week.
Yeah, Joe's awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
And same thing, I'm like, you run these workshops. I'm like, these are the things that I wish I had when I first started.
Yeah, because for me, it's also the fact that it is in person. Like we do run lots of online ones, and usually they're more like I focus on like talking through an experience or something that I've been a part of that's worth talking about. But for those hands-on moments where someone's just, you know, they've kind of hit maybe a plateau and you're like, oh, you should try this. Or maybe a setting that they don't understand. You just walk over like, oh, this is how you do that. And then you see the moment like that clicks in their head, and that's really satisfying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it would also be a great opportunity to try and not latch onto, but find people in the community if you're struggling to. Like, say you're too busy to have someone follow you around all day, but they can be around you for one of these workshops, right? And learn from you in other ways, but as well as community.
But also, I was about to say, the real thing for me is people talking in amongst themselves.
Meeting each other, exactly.
All of the workshops I run, I always include some kind of networking element. So they are there to, you know, try some gear, have some fun, hopefully develop something for their portfolio. That is a big goal of mine. I want anyone who comes to a workshop, I want them to at least take one photo that they can go, yes, and put on their website. Yeah. But outside of that, I just want them all to become friends.
Yeah, totally. And there is, I think, it's also the mindset of knowing that everyone can teach you something.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't always have to be like that dude that you look up to. If you go to these workshops, I'm sure like everyone has a different workflow. Yeah. And just watching how they do things can teach you something that you can implement into your own workflow.
Yeah, definitely.
And it could come from like the least expecting person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those workshops look great. I was telling Joe, I was like, I need to make my way to one.
You need to get along to
They look epic.
There's a lot running. So there's a team of...
they seem to happen all the time now.
It's like 20 of us, I think. 25 of us across Australia and New Zealand.
How do you even get put onto Sony's radar? How do you get into this Sony scene?
I think a large part of it depends how you want to work with a brand. So say, for example, any major brand, so I'm talking inside and outside the photo like sphere, but if you're working with any brand and you want to work as like an influencer, content creator type thing, then obviously you have to put in the work. The content has to exist. You have to have some form of proof of concept before that they'll start working with you. And unfortunately, like any brand, there's certain metrics that go along with that. You know, if they're trying to promote X product, they need to be able to have some kind of return. So I think a lot of people are leaning towards that, especially a lot of younger content creators. They see what's possible, and they go, that's what I want to do. And unfortunately, you look at these influencers that have huge followings, and more often than not, they've been doing this for 10 years, and it's the last 2 years that we see. You see them everywhere now, and you go, wow, look at all this cool stuff they're doing. They're being flown to Turkey. They're going here, going to New York, all that kind of stuff. I want to do that. You're not seeing the 8 years that goes in beforehand of them just churning out content, hoping to get on the radar. But in terms of working with a brand in the way that I work with Sony, a lot of it's to do with technical understanding and then education. I think is a big part. So
is that something that you had to prove to them that you could do?
I was really lucky because I actually used to work for Sony full time.
Okay, there you go.
And then I was
What'd you do there?
So I was a product specialist.
Awesome.
So kind of getting to know all the products and then also teaching and running workshops anyway.
Wow, okay.
So I was very lucky that I had I had my foot in the door, which I am obviously very privileged to have.
Of course.
And not everyone's afforded that opportunity. But I think it put me in a really good position. So the advocate team, you know, some of them have huge followings, you know, 100K, 200K. They're all amazing photographers and filmmakers, but some of them have almost no social media presence. And not that that's a bad thing. It's they're very accomplished in their field. They're extremely talented, but that's just not a priority for them. But, you know, education, workshops and teaching might be. And I think Sony looks at that, or any brand would look at that and think, well, you know, this person has the ability, they have the skill set, they're passionate about what they do. This is the right kind of person we want to put in front of our customer base. So I know we're talking very like salesy stuff now, because
but
ultimately any brand wants sales, but I think that's the fundamental basis of like what I do.
Yep.
So it's not always like, am I the best landscape photographer? No. Am I the best wedding photographer? Gosh, no. But do I understand all the technical elements, and do I have the experience to be able to like ignite a passion in someone that they can then grow with? And I think that's the real tick for that.
That's worth more than followers and views.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially for what they're trying to do, right?
Yeah, they're trying to grow a community. Having kind of these figureheads is great, but you really, the way Sony always pitched it to me when I was working there is like, you know, you're the actual boots on the ground type thing, you know? You're there actually, you know, putting in the hard yards.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I'm sure, like, in terms of the workshops that are run, who comes up with the topics? Is it something?
Oh, that's me. No, that's me.
So you have an idea, you put it to Sony, and you're like, hey, I want to run this.
Yeah.
Because
it's actually pretty loosey-goosey compared to the way you're describing it. So the benefit of it is because they trust us and our experience, we can run almost anything we want. The way it works is we can organize our own events, or we can go through like a retail channel, like any of the retailers in Australia. So we have a bit of options there. But fundamentally, you know, if I wanted to run a skateboarding workshop, that's something I've never done before. I could just make it happen. And it can be very small. It can be really big. I like the smaller stuff because it's easier to manage. It's just a bit more community focused. You're not having these huge, like 150 person events, but also because we work as contractors, we do operate independently. So it's the bigger the event, the more investment I have to make into making it possible. So those smaller events tend to suit me a bit better.
And do you get a lot of support from them in terms of like, you'd be an event organizer to some degree?
Yeah.
Which isn't easy
to
do.
Thankfully, the platform's set up really well. So it kind of takes a lot of the heavy lifting off our shoulders. But in terms of like support, like, we get access to gear.
Awesome.
Some other support depending on the scale of the event. I'm not trying to dig into numbers and stuff here.
No, that's cool.
But it can operate on a really small scale or it can operate on a really big scale. It just depends on, you know, who the event's targeted at, what's it for, that kind of stuff.
So like recently, were you able to just say, hey, Sony, I want to go to Japan?
No. It didn't work that way? It didn't work that way.
How does that come about?
So that was in partnership with one of the Camera House stores, Camera House Townsville.
Yep.
So that one is organized through a retail channel. So
how does it begin? How does this idea begin? Because you've gone on a few trips now.
Yeah, okay. Well, most of them generally involve some kind of like sale or some kind of investment from an attendee, and then some kind of like maybe a reward for saying, you know, thanks for being a part of the community.
Yeah.
So Sony are giving away a trip to Santorini this year as part of the Scene Festival.
Yep.
I got to go to Antarctica as part of a deal with Intrepid Travel.
Yep.
So Intrepid were already running existing photo education courses on board. And I wasn't sure who approached who first, but basically Sony was like, hey, we'll send you down just a bucket load of gear for all the attendees to use, kind of adding value to your existing program, and we'll send someone down to look after it all.
And you were that guy.
And I was that guy.
Wow.
So there was a big team of us that went down.
Cool.
We kind of took it in turns. So, you know, I got to spend a whole month down there.
Was
which
that a
is
workshop?
insane.
So like, what were the other guys doing in that group?
So there were two other photo guides. So they're driving the Zodiacs every day, kind of running the actual program that's like an existing program.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like an attaché. Like I was just kind of inserted in to look after all the gear, shoot a bit of stuff for myself, and then obviously also help teach and troubleshoot if anyone had problems.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Antarctica is something that nobody has been to.
Yeah, personally, I would not be able to afford to go without something like this. So I'm very, very thankful and very fortunate to you know, be in a position where my name even gets thrown into that hat.
Of course.
So I consider myself very lucky, and it's just something that you can't describe. It's, you know, you see photos from like Greenland, Iceland.
Your page looks incredible. Oh. It's hard not to see the Antarctica stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's funny coming back though. It's I reflect on it, and I'm kind of like, oh, I don't think people should be going there. Like it's the last great wilderness. Like it is the last place with the most minimal human impact, and that's something that's very important to me. But in saying that, like if you get the opportunity to go, absolutely go.
People? Did you see people?
So obviously there's
outside of your group?
Outside of the ship that we're on, so about 200 passengers.
Yep.
You might see one or two other cruise ships kind of floating around.
Okay.
But no, it's like desolate. There's just nothing.
Super isolated.
Yeah.
Freezing.
Yeah.
The content, like what you took was incredible.
Oh,
I saw the whales and the penguin. Like what an experience.
It's funny coming from Sydney because this is obviously like a whale hotspot for Australia.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and everyone's always on the coast during the season looking out for whales. And if you see a whale, you're like, yes, big tick, like happy day. Whereas in Antarctica, because that's their feeding ground.
Yeah, wow.
It's basically like, you know, I'm seeing 30, 40 whales a day.
Wow.
Like it's just insane.
Just everywhere.
Yeah, just everywhere.
What an experience.
Yeah.
I think you did a great job of like, there's so much feeling in the photos and the
oh, thanks.
the videos. You can tell how cold it is, like the contrast, like it's really,
that's
really
something
cool.
I really wanted to bring out because from a technical standpoint, you know, your camera looks at a purely white landscape and it just warms it up so much.
Yeah.
And then, you know, exposing for those highlights because everything's just white is very difficult. So that was a bit of a learning curve. I've never really shot in that environment before. And I was finding that I was still shooting normally-ish, and I was just like cooling the images down so much because you want it to feel cold. You don't want to take a photo of an iceberg and it be like a warm yellowy color. Like it just doesn't work.
I agree.
So I was cooling them down, and I was finding that from a technical standpoint, I was pulling my images down like a whole stop.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it brings out the texture, brings out those deep blues in the water.
There's feeling in those images. It looks cold. It looks isolated.
It looks freezing.
It looks dark.
It was only about -2.
Okay.
So not actually that cold.
I thought it would have been a lot colder.
No, because you only go in the summer season.
Okay.
If you go in winter, you basically can't even approach the peninsula.
Because of the icebergs.
The actual Antarctic continent swells by something like 30% over winter. So, you know, all that sea ice starts to form and then solidifies and you can't even get a boat in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an experience, man.
Yeah, I learned so much. I went focused so much on the photography and the filmmaking.
Yep.
And I came back just obsessed with the science, the geology, just so much. Like the thing I really loved about Intrepid as a brand is all of the Zodiac guides. So the Zodiacs are those like little rubber ducky boats like the Navy SEALs use.
Yeah.
All of the Zodiac drivers, they're just like, they live and breathe Antarctic, but they also do Arctic and stuff as well. But these people just live and breathe it. And more often than not, they're not just a Zodiac driver. They're like a marine biologist or a glaciologist or a geologist. And their wealth of experience just like incredible. So I found that I was so going there and being like, sweet, I'm going to pump out content. This is going to be really good for my brand. Like that was me going in, and then coming out, I'm just like, wow, like I want to apply it for next season to go and work down there outside of any partnership, like actually just get a job working there. And it really made me want to get more into wildlife photography and just more into that like conservation sphere, because that's really important to me. And I was just like, oh, this is it. Like that's
so interesting. And you've been able to make something out of that. I feel like a lot of your work is inspired by outdoor travel. I feel like even landscape photography, when I first started out, I was like, I need to make a career out of this.
Yeah. Landscape's not the way.
Yeah, exactly. You look at the reason I've never done outdoor or landscape is like, how do you make money out of that? I have like no idea how to do that. So I just veered away from it. If someone did want to create a career they just love outdoors and landscape, like how would they go about it? How would you advise someone who's just starting out to go about?
I'm probably not the right person to speak on this, to be honest, because for me, the outdoorsy side of my brand, I haven't really like monetized in any way.
Okay.
Like I sell the occasional print, but to me, like that's just, I do that for me.
Yeah, I think of just prints. Like I would probably approach it differently now, especially with what we're talking about or the experience that I have now is probably trying to attach myself to like outdoor brands.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like maybe, I don't know, not much of an outdoor, Arc'teryx, North Face, and just trying to...
Yeah. So I've worked with a few brands that have worked, or I've worked with a few people and a few brands that have worked closely with like Arc'teryx and like North Face and a few, and I'd love to get into that because I think that's the, like, if you want to go on a hike and shoot cool outdoor content at in amazing locations, then I think it's very easy to just attach a brand to that somehow.
Yep.
And brands love those kind of authentic stories. So smaller brands, it's very much like product.
Yeah.
And then as you move up the scale and you're talking like Patagonia, Arc'teryx, Merrell, they start shifting to, you know, it's not about the product. It's someone's doing something amazing and we want to be a part of that.
Attached to
so you see like those short docos about someone skiing like part of Nepal, or you see someone paragliding and trying to like break a world record or something. Same way that Red Bull functions, where it's not about the product anymore. It's purely about the experience and the story.
Someone doing something adrenaline filled.
Like they tried to land a plane on a like a skyscraper, a helipad or something.
Oh wow!
And you think about that from a brand story perspective, it's like it's just got Red Bull slapped all over it
everywhere. Yeah,
but it's purely about the people involved, the emotion and the story. And I think brands really,
the
especially
actual drink
outdoor
is
brands,
never even seen in
no.
any of this stuff.
No, not at all.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're the case study for the best indirect branding you can achieve.
Correct. You've just made me like all the Red Bull content I see, I've never seen the can. Like it's not about the product anymore.
No.
It's about the feeling and the story and attaching yourself to the emotions that come from these people doing other things.
And it's not even like they're doing it like on a tactical level. They're not being like, this person can do this amazing thing because they drink Red Bull. They don't even pitch that at all. It's completely devoid of that. It's, hey, this person's doing something cool and our logo just happens to be on their clothing.
Yep, correct.
That's all they need.
That's so true.
And it's amazing.
Yeah. And people associate with that. Like it really works.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So I think with that approach, you'd have to be, as a creative, the approach would be like trying to get better at storytelling. Yeah. Right. And being able to interpret or show these stories and feelings. I was looking through your YouTube page.
Oh no.
Which was but it was great. I came across the last shot where you were trying to shoot the Milky Way.
Oh yeah.
So I watched that. I thought it was great. In terms
I
of
wasn't
telling
happy
the story.
with that.
You weren't happy with it?
No.
I thought in terms of like practicing what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like
that was a couple of years ago, so I hope I do a better job now. But that was exactly that.
Yeah, still you always look back and you're like you're always got you should, I think.
Yeah.
Always look back and think you can do better. Otherwise you're not progressing.
Yeah.
But in saying that, that's a great way to just go out there and shoot, tell a story, set out to do something, and you can attach that to any brand, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think like the premise for that is find a unique story, because for me, because I love photography more than I actually like taking photos, which seems bizarre. Most people love the end product. They love the photos, and then photography is the process to get them there. Whereas I actually love the process more than I probably actually like the final images.
Yeah.
So for me, I've only ever produced content in like the photo sphere. You know, I worked for Sony, I made content for Sony, and now I work with Sony. And it's like, yes, I would love to work with other brands and like get into the outdoor creative space, but because I enjoy making content about the photo video process so much, for me it was like, how would I, if I wanted to work on a project, it's going to be photo focused.
Yep.
So rather than it being like, we're going to climb this or we're going to go do this, it would be, we're going to capture this. This is how we get there.
Yep.
So for me, like a large part of that storytelling is in how you got the image.
Yeah.
So this is a whole different debate about art itself. But you know, when you walk into a gallery, it could be any kind, it could be sculpture, fine art, graphic design, anything. And you look at an artwork, and if there's no placard, you can't read anything about it. You kind of look at it and go, oh yeah. But once you read the little card and you have an understanding of what brought that to fruition, that makes you appreciate it more.
I agree.
So it's like, you see a cool banger shot of a Milky Way, you're like, sick. But you see it and you're like, oh, there's only one day of the year where this will line up, blah, blah. You know, we had to hike like 600 meters down this canyon. The water level was rising at night, blah, blah, blah. Like all this stuff's happening. Suddenly you go, wow, like that image means more to you. And I think that's the differentiating factor between someone who just takes pretty photos and, you know, the kind of people that end up in Nat Geo or shooting for like big publications. Or there's a really, really talented photographer called, I think his handle on Instagram is just Ruben.
Okay.
But his thing is just, he lights things with drones.
He lights them with drones?
Yeah.
Wow. Like
so,
many drones?
Yeah. Okay. So he kind of started that, you know, that like orbit thing with the light on the drone, but it's expanded beyond that. It's not just lighting one subject. Now they're lighting cars at night. You know, they're lighting huge scenes, and it's kind of like the industry's moved in this direction where you have to be a Swiss Army knife, you know, like even for yourself, you know, you're producing content, but you're also editing, you're shooting, you're doing a podcast. You have to be this Swiss Army knife that can do everything. But at some point, that's like the middle of the market.
Mm.
And then once you progress past that point, you can specialize again.
Yep.
It, like 10 years ago, before gimbals existed, if you were a Steadicam operator, you were just a Steadicam operator, and you were just insanely good at that, and you would be hired because of that skill. And then I think at the top end, that's where you see people getting hired for those like brand campaigns, you know, Country Road, like even like back on the outdoor brands, they're hiring you because they know you can deliver one specific thing, and they want that one specific thing.
It's so true, man. And if you put yourself in like that play, imagine you're one of these big brands and you're sitting at a table and they give you these two guys that could do the job. Yeah. And one is also a wedding photographer and runs a podcast, and the other guy is just an outdoor photographer. Yeah. It's like, who would you pick? Obviously, the guy who just does that. Specializes in it.
So I think it's still important to go through that middle stage.
Yeah.
If I was starting again, I would still learn everything. Don't specialize too early.
Yes.
But obviously, like, find the thing that you are drawn to the most.
It's confusing, isn't it?
It's very confusing because I was on another podcast like a year and a half ago, and I was like, don't niche down, don't do it.
It depends on where you are in your career, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm still in that middle phase as well, so that's why I still think personally I don't want to niche down.
Yeah.
But when you look at, now that I'm thinking, 5 years, 10 years, what's going to happen in my career, I'm already kind of looking like, well, what do I want to really focus in on? Something that's going to separate me from the crowd.
True.
And not in like an egotistical way, in a way that like I want my photography to take me somewhere.
Yep.
And that's not, for me, that's not a financial goal. That's a like a travel lifestyle goal. So I want it to take me somewhere, and I'm kind of thinking, what are the steps I need to take to make that a reality?
It's almost like, what do you want to be identified as? Like when someone says Clyde, what do you think they're saying now? Like,
well, I hope they're going, oh, it's that sick dude who runs all those workshops.
True, but for a lot of people, like for me, if I could be anything. I could be the podcast guy to someone, the gym guy to someone else. And if you're trying to build a personal brand, that's not the best thing. You really want people to be like, that's the guy that does that.
Yeah. In saying that though, I think it's healthy to diversify.
Of course.
Because at the moment I'm very much just like, all I do is photography and workshops and video, and that is my personal brand, and that's fine. But I think it's also important to not neglect the other parts of your life that you really enjoy that maybe don't get seen on social media. So I get in this bad habit of just only focusing on content or only working. It's a very toxic trait, but I go months and months where I'll only work, and the only people I see are work-related things.
I know that feeling.
So I've been like, going into next year, I'm trying to spend a bit more time just doing stuff for me and not worrying about, does it fit, does it not fit?
Of course. Yeah. And it's important to like step away and do those other things. One, like those projects, or even if it's completely unrelated, it's fulfilling. Like you're filling another bucket, and then when you do come back to the work, you feel more refreshed and energized. Yeah. And willing to do it rather than drain. Yeah. Like I think burnout's a big thing. Yeah, burnout's a huge thing.
I think as well because it only gets worse, especially for content creators. So I think if you're running a production company where you're dealing with larger clients and you have time to slow down, then it's probably not as bad, even though the stress and the scale of those projects is bigger. But I think those beginner content creators are just looking at how much they need to churn out. It's no longer one cool show reel a year. I remember being on YouTube 10 years ago, and even though I wasn't watching that kind of content yet because it didn't exist, it was, this YouTuber would drop this one camera review a year, and you were like, whoa, that's the one. Yeah. or you would watch back then I was, 10, 14 years ago, I was like really into the parkour scene. So
okay, I saw a bit of that.
I was teaching parkour full time.
Wow.
I'd gone overseas a couple of times for it. Like I was going to competitions and like performing reasonably well. Like that was a big part of my life.
Wow.
But then obviously again, I still try to do as much of that as possible because that's what I still love.
You jump off buildings and stuff?
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow.
But someone would drop their show reel and it would be one video a year, and you would just lose your mind because like it's just everything they've done that year, and you would be so impressed and so inspired. But now as younger content creators are coming through, and it's just like the cycle. It's like it used to be even a 24-hour news cycle. Remember like the news cycle when they started saying 24-hour news, and everyone was like, whoa. Now I think content is on like an 8-hour or less content kind of like cycle. Like if every 8 hours there's something new, or even shorter than that. I'm actually not that sure.
Yep, I agree.
But it feels like you have to pump something out.
Or it's just everything's quickly forgotten because there's
completely
so much
forgotten. Whereas like there's old parkour videos that I can still name and like bring up on YouTube, and I can still see the impact they've had on the community.
You're right.
Whereas, and like there are some films that have that impact on, say, the photo video community.
Yep.
But because it's a much bigger community, obviously it's harder to determine.
Yeah.
But could you think of one piece of content that just absolutely fundamentally changed photo video in the last 5 years?
Exactly. It doesn't happen as often.
Well, I can't even think of one at all.
Because there's so much.
That's it. There's just too much.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And I look back, even regardless of what industry you're in, there are those where you're like, wow, like it really impacted you. Because
absolutely. And I think that might also be my own reflection because I was younger and you're more influenced by things. Maybe. And, you know, now I'm old and cynical. but yeah, I think it's like, I can't even describe it. Looking at something that's fundamentally changed the photo video realm in the last 5 years, it's hard to think of one piece of content that just everyone saw and everyone just collectively agreed that's the way forward.
True.
Yeah.
True. Do you think it's because there is a lot of content now that starts looking very similar to others? Because like that's just what works. Like people, it's what algorithm favors, and people want view. Like there's genuine results that come from having, whether you like it or not, like people having a big following or lots of views, brands want that audience. So there are opportunities that come with high viewership, high followership, right?
Oh, definitely.
So when the algorithm's saying, if you do this, we're going to give you lots of views, you're going to feed into that. It's tempting to just do what everyone else is doing because you're going to get views and followers, and that's what people want. However, it's also good to stand out. I heard you in a video say that a lot of the people that you aspire, a lot of the creators who inspire you they've got an aesthetic about them. You can tell it's their work. They consistently can produce the same results.
And you want to be able to pick them out from a crowd because of that. Yeah.
Right? That's very contradictory to what works.
Yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And for a beginner creator, that's very confusing. Yeah. Because it's like, do I do what everyone else is doing because these trends are working and I really want to grow my brand, but at the same time, I want to stand out and I want to have my own style and my own voice. How do you balance those two?
So with my own personal brand, it's the content that I want to make is like cool landscapes, very vibey, lo-fi tracks, hiking, nice portraits, cool sunrise and sunsets, right? And like that does perform reasonably well. Yep. And I absolutely hate being on camera. I hate talking to camera.
This is awesome.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely and then so I hate being on camera. I hate talking to camera. Those two perform really well. As soon as I bite the bullet and just go, you know what, I'm just gonna I have to make this piece of content, whether it's paid or not. I'm like, oh fine, all right, I'll do it. And it performs really well. Yeah. And then whenever I post gear. Okay. So this is something that I know a lot of YouTubers have complained about. It's like you make something like a film, like a cinematic film or some kind of thing that you're very passionate about. It just and then you make something like, oh, my top 5 accessories for this, and it just blows up. Yes. And I found that as well. It's the content I want to make is still photo related, and you know, it's like it might just be like, this is something you can cool you can create with this, or how to get this effect, or just something nice and pretty, basically. Yep. But then if I just post like a BTS video of just my phone on the back of my camera at a wedding, like 400K. Yeah, wow. And when I do branded content where I'm like reviewing something, that performs really well. Okay. Also, and I'm just like, that's great because it pays the bills, but that's not the end goal. Yeah.
It's not as fulfilling to you. Yeah. Towards the other content. I've thought about this a lot too.
Go for it. I don't want to name and shame, but I did some work for a brand recently. Yep. And it was like a apparel brand, but the product they sent me didn't suit me like whatsoever. Like I physically, I couldn't even use it. I couldn't figure out a way to use it. It didn't suit me. It wasn't even a great product overall. Yep. And like, obviously I'm still contractually bound to make the content. Yep. So I did, but I think I regret that now. And I wish I'd kind of stood my ground and went, no, actually this project isn't for me.
That'd be hard to do when you first start getting them, right? Yeah. Because you just feel...
Yeah, especially when... Great if it's unpaid, maybe you probably have a bit bit of a better position to say no. But when it's paid and you're kind of like, oh, well, I actually don't have a lot of work on this one.
Yeah, true.
I might just jump on this.
But I think people can feel when something's not genuine.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've seen content where, and I assume it'd be the same thing. Like you don't want to be promoting something and then people know you, especially the bigger you grow your personal brand, people get to know more about you.
Yeah.
And then you promote something and people straight away know, that's not Clyde.
Yeah. He'd never use that. Yeah.
He would never use it. And that feeling, it never comes across well. And if anything, that hurts your brand more than it benefits.
I agree. So I think for a beginner, I think that's very important to kind of set those boundaries for yourself.
I think you just want recognition. When you're a creator at the start, it's like, I just want people to recognize that I'm doing well.
Yeah, and I think taking those brand deals is very beneficial because I had a very small following, but when you get one brand deal, other brands see that and they'll say, well, they've worked with such and such, or they've worked with this person, or maybe they are worth keeping an eye on. And then it slowly builds and builds and builds and builds. And, you know, the name of the not the caliber of brand, because I'm not trying to like rank any brands, but, you know, as you kind of work your way up that scale, I can definitely see how larger brands would say, well, you know, they've worked with this. They can look at the metrics. Again, it all comes down to metrics. I see so many comments on stuff and I see a lot, especially on Facebook and maybe some older photographers that kind of came in at the end of the social media wave.
Yep.
And a lot of them will complain based on, you know, oh, why won't X brand notice me? Or why aren't I getting these deals? Why aren't I being given free stuff and all of that? And I think it's purely, it's metrics. Like we love to think of the creative world as, you know, art driven, but unfortunately, like anything, it's sales driven.
It's results driven.
Yeah, it's results driven.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of brands, like you were saying at the very beginning, this is what brands look for. Yeah. Like a return on their investment. And if you can prove that you've done it time and time again for brands you've worked for in the past, you're more likely to get the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you haven't got anything to show that you've helped another brand in the past, it's going to be hard to.
Yeah. But then again, sometimes you make content that just flops. Like it's just the nature of the game, I think. So I try not to read into it too much or get too cynical about it. I think the main thing is like, even despite as a beginner and you're trying to navigate all of this at the same time as learning, I think you just, like I said earlier, just put the reps in, learn first, and that will prepare you.
Yes.
Because I've always been a photographer and filmmaker, but I've only been a business owner for 3 years. So I'm still learning. I'm not a pro. The advice I could give anyone for business stuff is probably worse than any of the technical stuff. Don't do anything I say business-wise. But yeah, I think everything's a learning curve.
Yeah.
And you look at some amazing photographers that just shoot on the side. And that's because maybe they don't want to, or it's too risky, or they don't have the business skills. And then I know some terrible photographers that have amazing businesses. Yep. Just because they're better with working with people. They're really good at negotiating. They have the business acumen to make it possible. And then obviously the perfect world is you want a healthy mix of both. You want to have the skills to back up the business, and you want to have the business to back up the skills. Correct. So I think all of us are trying to work towards that. But I think, it's...
And I think it's being aware enough to know that you can't neglect one if you're trying to really make it. Yeah. And a lot of people try to. They're like, oh, I'm not a salesperson. I don't want to. They just avoid it. But the more you avoid it, the less opportunities you're able to get because of it. But learning the technical skills, like you were saying, like you said, I would learn the technical skills first. Yeah. When you got the Antarctica gig, you said, I'm very lucky and I'm very fortunate. But you spent all that time learning the technical skills.
That's true.
You wouldn't be in that position if you didn't spend all that time and become recognized as that person.
I think that also feeds into kind of like your portfolio of work, whether you're a content creator, filmmaker, whatever it is. Like you said, you have to be able to demonstrate that you can get the job done. Yeah. That's not just working with brands. That's for anyone hiring you. Someone wants LinkedIn headshots and you shoot macro fungi. You know what I mean? Like there's such a disconnect between what you're shooting at. Yep. So like there's that, who was it? I can't remember what quote it is, but like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah, true. If you don't even practice the shots to get there, that's going to come before you even shoot your shot. You have to one, build a skill set, and then also obviously be able to prove that you have the skill set.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you learn with each one. Like you learn with action. Every time you take an action, you get new information that's going to teach you how to do something better the next time. Like you were saying with the 3, you take 3 photos, you learn a little bit from each. Yeah. You implement them all into the 4th.
And then the 4th one will be the standout photo.
Exactly. Yeah. And you never get the 4th if you didn't take the first 3.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're right. And if you compound that over a very long period of time, you end up, with a bit of a reputation and an identity, I guess.
Yeah. And then there's obviously the issue where the further you move down that road, the more critical you become.
Yeah.
So I think at the beginning, it's that same kind of bell curve that you see across any creative industry, where you learn very quickly and then your understanding is better. So then you critique yourself more and you think that you take worse photos, or you think that the quality of your work is diminishing over time.
Yeah.
But that's only because your technical or creative understanding is getting better.
Yes.
So I think you've got to juggle that. It's like you might take those first 3 photos and the 4th one's the best one, but that 5th photo is probably going to be worse than the 4th because you're overthinking it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. That reminds me of like a learning. You were talking about a bell curve. Someone was talking about like the enjoyment you get from any hobby is like the first time you do it, it's so fun because it's new and it's exciting. And the enjoyment you get, if it was on a graph, is like really high.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you reach a point where you're frustrated because you can't do the things you really want to do. Yeah. Like you don't have that and for a really long time, it's just frustrating and it sucks. And most people quit in there because it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But if you can push through all that and learn all the technical skills, eventually at some point it gets fun again because you can do all those things and then you get like...
That's what I tell people when I was teaching parkour. So I was teaching parkour for 10-ish years.
Wow.
It's like...
That's like a whole different life.
Yeah, I know. It's a whole nother life. But it's the same thing with anything. It's when you first start, it's new. Like you said, it's new, exciting, but also you're kind of welcoming the challenges.
Yeah.
Because they're so rewarding when you learn something new. But the difference between, someone that's been doing something for 10 years and 1 year, it's like it might look impossible to reach that destination, but you got to hit those kind of hurdles along the way. And then like the people that were really good at parkour, they make it look effortless.
Yeah.
And that effortless comes from the experience. But then also you can tell that they're having fun with it again. They're not fighting their body to accomplish something because they've built the skill set, they've built the strength, they've built the confidence to be able to operate at that level and make it look effortless.
Yeah.
And I think that ties in with, especially because we've been chatting a lot about social media,
yep.
because of that quick turnaround time, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's the best quality of work.
Yeah, I agree.
I think personally, I'm happy to take a hit and post something that's not the best I can make, but as long as it's there.
Yep.
Like it's more important to be seen than to be kind of like revered, I guess.
Yeah. No,
like,
I get you.
This is a bad analogy, but you think of celebrities that, bad press is, or all press is good press.
Yeah.
You think of a celebrity that's done something, less than ideal or a bit shady, people are still talking about them. And unfortunately, that's good for their personal brand.
Of course.
Whereas if you're not appearing, not producing anything, no one's talking about you.
Of course.
So,
and I think you get better quicker that way. If it took me 6 months to make something, to make one piece of content that I thought was trying to be perfect, and in that 6 months you took 100 different, right, you're going to get better because you've learned 100 times, as opposed to me sitting there trying to make that one perfect piece of content.
I think another tip for beginners especially is go back through your favorite content creator, especially mainly Reels, because obviously that's where most of the growth's come from in the last couple of years. But just go back and scroll and just be like, how often are they posting? It's like every day. And it's even if one day's good, next day's bad, one day good, one day bad, you'll look at it and you'll be like, all right, so they're fluctuating, but it's in between these fluctuations, it's just gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Correct.
Whereas if you're posting one thing every month, you can have a good one, a bad one, but that process is happening on a macro scale.
Yes.
Whereas if it's happening daily on a very small scale, even if the growth is physically smaller, it's going to compound over time better.
Yeah. That's true. It's just hard to like pull back, right?
Yeah, you gotta like zoom out.
Yeah. When you're in it, it's very hard to see a lot of these things. That's true, man. I was thinking about something you said earlier in terms of like the type of content that you think you should be creating based on the results that you're being given. Like,
Yeah.
right? When you're saying, well, I make something about cameras and that goes great, but I don't always want to be making things about cameras.
Yeah.
And I feel...
That's a lie, I do. No. No.
But not all the time,
not
right?
all the
Because you
time.
want to try different things. Like,
Yeah.
everyone has many different interests, and I think that's why niching down is hard, because you don't want to box yourself in when you know that you find enjoyment from doing many other things. And I think doing the same thing over and over and over again can lead to burnout as well.
Yeah.
But I also think that a lot of the things that do work are value driven. Like, the more value that you can provide, and I try and this is something that I've thought about a lot lately in terms of like trying to see things through this lens of providing value. Like, the viewer selfishly only cares about themselves.
Yes.
It's like, what can I learn from this? What can I get out of this? And a lot of the times you need to create knowing that that's what they're watching this for. And like the day in the life videos and the behind my brand, watch me build a brand, they're going off. Like, they're doing really, really well lately. And I genuinely think it's like, it's not because they care about you.
No, they
it's
don't
because
care.
they want to watch how you're doing it. Like,
so they can replicate
so
it.
they can replicate it. You're in a position that I want to be in, and if I can watch your process, I may be able to take something from that and implement it into my life.
Yeah.
And that's why it does well, because it's selfishly, they're getting value out of it. It's not because like they care about what you're having for breakfast.
No.
Same as this podcast, right?
Yeah.
People won't listen because like they care about me. They think maybe there's something that you can teach.
I think they do. I think they do.
Do you think so? I think it's
so.
more like through the stories that you tell and the experiences that you share, there may be something in there that I can take away and put into my life.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than caring about like where I was born and what I did.
okay.
It's like, why did he do that? Oh, cool. That's why he's doing that. Why am I doing my thing? It's not because of that.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to see this a different way. And you get someone else's worldview that you can then implement into your own.
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, it's like, cool, the day in the life videos are awesome, but it's not because of me. I need to provide value. Like, how can I provide value to whoever's watching it? How do I not waste this person's time? Because people are flicking through and it's
so
like,
fast.
this isn't worth my time. This isn't worth my time. This isn't worth my time. And you get half a second to kind of show that
It is worth
it is worth your time. And a lot of the time when you do create, it's like, put in the effort to make it worth someone's time. Like, you know, if I'm going to take a minute of your time, I need to respect that and try and give you something of value.
Yeah. I think there's this trap though, I find I'm trying to steer away from this because I feel like there's just already too much content about it. Yep. And I know that other people are better at speaking to this than I am.
Of course. And
that's specifically around the business stuff.
Yep.
So it's like, if you scroll on Reels, there's so much like motivational content and people are consuming that faster than most other forms of content because, you know, people want to feel a sense of purpose. They want their life to be moving towards something that they want to do, especially people, like you said, Pat, the train driver earlier, who wants to be a photographer.
Yeah.
You know, people want to work towards something. And unfortunately, like, you know, people there's a financial aspect to that. And I'm not the right person to speak to that. And I want people to view my content because they want to learn something that they care about or they want to see something that they care about. Whereas there's this, especially in the photo sphere at the moment, and not as much in the podcast sphere as much, but specifically in the photo sphere, there's like, oh, how I made 6 figures as a wedding photographer, or make your first 6 figures, or buy my course, buy my plan, buy my presets.
Yep.
And it does come across kind of disingenuous.
Yep.
It's my personal opinion is someone who's selling you a like one trick to getting rich thing.
Yep.
You are part of their scheme to get rich. Like anyone who's selling you like a drop shipping plan scheme thing, if it really worked, they would just be doing it themselves.
That's so true.
So it's like,
they wouldn't be doing
they wouldn't just be doing
They'd be off doing the thing that they're telling you that got them rich.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think you got to kind of like get through the weeds a bit to find the right person to kind of give that information to you. And I think podcasting is the safer option there than like those just random Instagramming stuff. Massive kudos to the creators that work in that sphere, you know, actually like helping people understand and like actually dispelling a lot of myths and financial literacy. Like that's really important, but that's just not my cup of tea.
It's hard.
So I find it really hard to add value because when you're scrolling, especially if you're a beginner photographer and you're like trying to book your first clients, are you going to watch the reel where Clyde is standing on a rock looking dramatically off into the sunset with some cool film burns in the transitions? Or are you going to watch the video where a wedding photographer says, hey, I just made 20K this month and this is how? Which one are you going to watch?
When you...
No, like fully honestly.
Yeah, fully honestly.
You're watching the second one.
If I'm looking at them both, if I'm looking at just those two pieces of content, I'm looking at the second one.
Exactly. And I agree with you. And that's something that I'm fully aware, like I need to add more value in my content.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about like the wider industry as a whole. It's so interesting that it is so business focused.
Of course, it is business focused. However, if you look at those two people, there's one guy that's just constantly trying to sell me things. And there's Clyde who's out there doing the work. He's the Sony guy. He goes to Antarctica, Japan. Like, I want to be that guy. I would rather listen to you because you're
actually... If I talked about that other topic.
If you talked about that other topic.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So there's value that's why there's value in having you on the podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Well, I really appreciate that. Like, feedback is good, especially as someone who... when you're in a workshop scenario or I'm doing Sony stuff or now talking to you, it's like I'm the guest, I'm the one who's kind of speaking a bit, but I find it really refreshing finding out more about it's got to go both ways. So,
but do you feel that way? Like, I don't want to come across as that guy.
Yeah,
therefore I don't want to do it.
Like, I don't want to sell out, and
of course.
I also don't want to.
But I think you're doing it the right way with these workshops. There is a way for you to like give back.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of the reason why I do this podcast. Is like at the start I had no one, man, and I see you guys doing those. I'm like, that's mad. And if there's any way that I can do the same, that's awesome. Because there is.
Do you find it really fulfilling having guests on and learning about their and obviously like it's just informative for me as well. Like this is only my second podcast. I've enjoyed learning a bit about how you operate, how you got here.
Yeah.
Like I like it being a two-way street.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, when you're at those networking events, getting to know everyone and picking up workflow and understanding how everyone operates, like that's just as important.
True.
Yeah.
It's hard though. For me, I'm super introvert. Like this is why I think this podcast works great for me. When I'm with one person, I'm good. Yeah. We can talk all day. Yeah. Put me in like a big group and I just shut up. Yeah, it's so weird. Okay. 3 people or more and I'm like, you guys talk.
Yeah.
And I just can't. I just don't have it in me. Yeah. Whereas like for me, this works well. And I think that's the same for a lot. Like they say a lot of creatives are introvert because you can just sit in your room and edit all day.
Yeah.
And these workshops are great because it gets them out of their shell. But at the same time, it's very uncomfortable for a lot of them to.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of talk around like accessibility at events recently. And I think a large part of that is just creating a space where people feel comfortable. So, you know, I'd hate it if someone was standing over my shoulder looking at the back of my camera while I shoot. Like I would hate that. And that's coming from a professional. So I can only understand how someone would feel if they were a beginner at, you know, an event with too many people and it's a bit claustrophobic and people are kind of fighting each other for shots. Like I can understand how that's not a conducive environment to grow in. So I think like about that is creating an environment where people feel comfortable to kind of step outside of their shell a little bit. I mean, when I'm on my own, I'm the biggest introvert. You could mic up my house at home and I would just be dead quiet, complete silence. And then as soon as I'm in a crowd, I think I compensate too much and I get like really bubbly, like really energetic. Cool. And I think I kind of love it. Like I thrive off it a little bit, but then I've got to charge my social battery and just be quiet for a bit.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But I feel like you just know you've got a lot of experience and you have a lot that you can give back without realizing.
Okay, that's good.
Do you not think that?
I think from a technical standpoint, maybe just because, you know, I've been around the product for so long and I know the ins and outs of it. But I think part of it is just, like I said earlier, putting in the reps.
Yep.
Because if, you know, I've done everything from weddings, events, corporate, commercial, music video.
Yeah, you have a really
short
large
documentary
scope of work.
I've even done product photography at some point, dabbled in macro. I've tried to do at least everything.
Yeah.
Like live music. Like I've shot everything at least once.
Yep.
And at least I'm not saying I know everything about every genre, but I understand it enough so that if someone asks me a question, I can be like, oh, maybe this would work better for you. And then part of that process at a workshop isn't me just telling someone how to do something. It's more like I'll backtrack a second. When I organize a workshop, more often than not, it's something that I want to shoot anyway, or something that I don't know how to do.
Yep.
And then I will go and teach myself how to do it.
Yes.
So then I can teach it to someone else.
That's awesome.
So if I say, hey, I did this shoot ages ago, I've seen some films where they had like the hazed out room and you put a projector behind your talent and it has like all the fingers of light kind of dancing around them in a silhouette.
Yep.
And I was like, how did they do that?
Yep.
Watched a dozen YouTube videos on how to do it. I went and bought all the equipment that I needed to make it happen so that people could come to the workshop and they could just get it straight away.
Wow.
They don't have to put the work in. They get the payoff,
Yep.
but they also learn how to do it.
Of course.
And I really liked working that way. It's I find an event that I would want to go to and then I make that event.
Yep.
I think workshop hosts as a whole, they either stick to their niche too much and they go, well, I'm this person, I have to just keep running the same thing, or they're doing it because they have one piece of information they want to give. Whereas I look at it as a community, like a collaborative thing. If a workshop attendee said, hey, can we change this light, do this, move that? I'm like, sweet, what's your idea? Like, let's do it.
Yep.
I like that process.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's great to know that like someone that has been doing it for 12 years, like there's still so much to learn.
So much to
even
learn.
in your position.
Yeah, still learning, always learning.
Which is also a good thing for people starting. Like there's a lot of people, not just in any industry, that like they don't want to start until they know everything.
Oh, that's
and
impossible.
It's knowing, you're never going to know everything, so you may as well just start.
Yeah.
And even with the workshops too, I feel like it's very beneficial for you, because I've always thought that like you don't really understand something until you can teach it to someone else.
Yeah.
Like if you can't teach it to someone else, like at a basic level, you probably don't understand it well enough.
Yeah.
Yet.
I think as well, because there's so many rabbit holes in the creative space, you know, like someone could be the most amazing photographer, and then you set up a set of strobes and a flash for them, and they're like, well, no, I'm tapping out. And I was that person for a long time. So I think, you know, understanding it is one thing, but understanding it is what lets you change it. It's like when you learn maths in high school. I hated maths in high school because I didn't understand what it was for.
Yep.
So I didn't do anything crazy mathematic wise, but you'd learn like a formula, you'd learn integration or differentiation, and it's just this jumble of numbers and you're just swapping in and out the numbers and you don't know what it's actually doing. And now that I'm an adult, I watch this YouTube channel called Veritasium.
Okay.
He's a scientist or like a mathematician.
Yep.
And he just breaks down like insanely complex mathematical ideas and he'll be like, oh, this is why this happens. And one of them was like just how water leaks from a tap.
Okay.
Because sorry, this is a massive tangent.
No, this is great.
But the diameter of the tap fitting is constant. The water pressure is constant.
Yeah.
So why does it drip randomly? Like it doesn't drip in a constant rate.
Okay, yeah, I
and the
understand what you're
size of
saying.
droplet changes. Anyway, and he breaks it down and it's called chaos theory.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's like it's this whole mathematical formula of these fragmentations of chance, basically.
Okay.
And when you scale it across every number that we know of, it looks like a giant butterfly. Like, and that's where the butterfly effect comes from.
Okay.
Anyway, and I was just like, oh man, that's so cool.
And then it's something that appears random isn't so random after all, because
And
you understand it.
And it's this thing called like the bifractal, and it's like it follows this pattern, and everything that cannot be replicated, or what we would call random, follows this exact pattern.
Wow.
So it's like when we first developed random number generators, it used this calculation to generate a random number.
Wow.
Because any other formula, it wouldn't truly be random.
Yep.
So anyway, and it's the same pattern that when you go into heart palpitations, when your heart starts beating irregularly, again, it's the same pattern.
You start seeing it everywhere.
And you start seeing it everywhere.
Wow.
It's amazing. Go watch the channel. Go watch the channel.
You put me on it.
Yeah, okay.
Wow.
But yeah, like for someone who hates maths and then now loving it, it's the same thing with like photography. If you're not just if I use that analogy where you've got a mathematical formula, you don't know what it's for, you just know how to swap the numbers in and out. That's like you understanding how to shoot manual.
Yep.
You know kind of what they do, but you're just swapping the numbers in and out and hoping it works. Whereas when you truly understand it, then you can start opening up more and more avenues.
Of course.
So like eventually you get to the point where you can walk outside and you just know exactly what settings you would use.
Yes.
Or say, you turn your flash up by 2 stops, I would just automatically turn my ISO down by 2 stops. And you know that your exposures will be the same. Whereas for a beginner, when you start dealing with flash and things like that, they start to get really confused because they're not understanding the mathematical side, the technical side of photography. You go, oh, well, now it's too bright. What should I do to fix that? Whereas I know, you could do 2 stops in aperture. You could do 2 stops in shutter speed, or you could do 2 stops in ISO. So you start once you understand it, you can push and pull and move that exposure triangle any which way you want because you understand it.
Exactly. So like they say, I've heard it before, you need to understand the rules first before you can break the rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that happens when you're a beginner creator, you get to learn all these rules, and then you look at someone that's done great work and you're like, he's broken all the rules. This doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's true.
The way I always teach it is, because I am a technical minded person, I would say,
I can tell.
Yeah, I love the technical side. But say, for example, when you're learning manual for the first time, what will fundamentally change your image the most isn't the technical stuff. You can have crazy high ISO, crazy low ISO. Will that fundamentally change the image? Not really. The one that will change your image the most is your aperture. So make that choice first, because that's you in control of what you want.
Yep.
So I always do creative choices first, technical choices last.
Okay.
But there's so many photographers I see out there that will set their ISO first and then make their other 2 choices. But as soon as you lock in one of those 3 values, you're already putting limitations on your other 2.
True.
So I make my creative choices first. So do I want to shoot shallow? Do I want to shoot deep? Make that choice first. And then I go, well, do I want it to be frozen or not frozen? That's when you make your creative shutter speed choice.
Yep.
And then your ISO is just the last one you do, and it's your technical choice. And if you follow that, creative through technical, every time you just work left to right.
Yep.
Piece of cake.
It is. Trust me, it is.
Yeah, you just work left to right. Just bang, bang, bang. And it's so easy that way.
Yeah, that's cool. I've heard you talk before about there's a difference between making a picture and taking a picture.
You've done some research.
I've done a little bit. I've done a little bit. Can you explain the difference between the two?
So some genres are about taking a photo. Some are about making a photo. I think we should all strive for making a photo as opposed to taking one. Taking one implies that there's a moment and you take it and you are just simply negotiating the choices and technical choices to make that moment appear clear, easy, done on the camera. Whereas making a photo feels like a production. So it's harder with some genres, like say landscape. You are really just taking a photo, but you're still making a lot of choices.
You can still sort of, in that video that you made with
you're making a photo.
You've made that because you know that the Milky Way is coming at 6 a.m.
and that's where the differentiation is. It's you're not just there at the right place at the right time. You are going there for a specific reason with intention. And I think when you translate that across all genres of photography, especially those people that shoot like studio or food photographers in particular, all the way through to like wedding, portrait, everything, commercial, music video, everything. You're making the scene. You're not just capturing it as it is.
Correct.
And I think that's that next step of elevating the quality of your work.
Yeah. It almost by setting out to make photos, you're challenging your skill set. Yeah. And you'll accelerate your learning, I guess.
Yeah, like that Ruben guy said again. It's like, so a landscape photo wasn't enough. He wanted to introduce a drone and light the scene. And then it goes, well, what can we do with the drone? Maybe we could start moving the drone while we're doing the exposure. And then it's like, right, well, one drone wasn't enough. Let's do 2. Yeah. And then it builds and builds and builds until you're fully sculpting the image that you want from start to finish, as opposed to just capturing something that you see like in a fleeting moment.
Of course.
Yeah.
Where do you get your ideas to make things?
Honestly, social media, like, I think I've said this before, but it's both not beneficial to you and very beneficial.
Yes.
In the sense that I love it because I can look at work that inspires me, and I save it every Friday. I do a feature Friday on my socials, and annoyingly, it's always like the same. I try to spread the love, but there's 1 or 2 photographers that end up in every single week, and that just shows that they are consistently producing the work that resonates with me, and that's not a bad thing. I think if you're constantly inspired by a particular style, or even better, one particular person's work, just like double down on it.
Yeah,
like
true.
really pick it apart. What do you like? What do you not like? And
so true, man.
yeah,
It's so true. I think it's really important to not just look at it and be like, oh, wow. It's like, why do I love this?
Yeah.
Why is this so good? Why does a lot of the time, I did this when I first started. I'm like, this is just a picture of the beach. I see the beach all the time, but why does this one look great?
Why does it look good?
And just taking the time to kind of try and figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because of this, because of the lighting, it's because of the time of the day, their shutter speed, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And by analyzing work, especially the people that you look up to, you can learn a lot.
Yeah. I've also started, I'm a Pinterest girly now.
That's
from
addictive.
Pinterest.
I just spoke to a guy today. He's like, I got on Pinterest, man. Everything's in there.
Pinterest is great, especially for collecting similar content. So if you were using Instagram to find something, Instagram's great for specific locations because you can just look at the tags and then like nail it down. But if you're looking for a mood or an aesthetic, the SEO isn't really designed that way on a lot of social media platforms. Whereas like Pinterest is just rigged for it. Yeah. So if you want to do a studio shoot and you want this specific look, you can just search like cool specific like just like put it in and it's all there.
It's so true. And all you have to do is save like 5 photos into a mood board, and then at the bottom it's like, want to see more of this? Yeah. And it just opens up
auto-populate.
It's great. I want to kind of ask you a few things in terms of like your work now.
Okay.
So like, let's say all your work disappeared tomorrow. Yeah. Except for one. Except for one project that you've done. Which one would you want it to be and why?
Oh, that's hard. I think clearly Antarctica.
Antarctica. You open your page and it's like...
Yeah, I feel like I've worked on a lot of projects. Like I've done some really cool stuff. It's never really attached to my brand. I'm sometimes working with other agencies, or I've worked with... You know, I had the opportunity to shoot Rufus Du Sol live. Wow. Purely because it was like their first time back in Australia in like 10 years.
How do you end up in a concert?
How do you end up in that room, right?
Yeah, especially when you look at your page and it's like weddings, travel.
It's again word of mouth. Nearly all of my work is word of mouth. Yeah. But I was shooting for a friend of mine who was shooting for a Louis Vuitton sponsored. You know, he was a Louis Vuitton model from Indonesia. Wow. And my job was to follow him around at the Louis Vuitton showcase in Sydney, and make reels for him. Wow. So I'm there doing that, and that was awesome. And then at the end of the night, I got to shoot Rufus Du Sol because they were playing that show. Wow. And it's like, out of all the cool stuff I've got to do, it is really hard to pick one. But I think the one that is most like exciting to me is Antarctica. Like it's hard to go past. Would it book me work? Probably not. But if that was all I could keep, that would be the one. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's right out, like it's everything that you love. It's not like it's just a cool gig.
Yeah, exactly.
You live and breathe this outdoor stuff. You can tell that it's like, that's his thing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard to like, I love what I do on a day-to-day, which is predominantly weddings. So I shoot for myself, my own brand. I shoot for a lot of other brands as well, like second shooting, because it's really easy work. You don't have to edit. Usually it's great. Yep. But like Quinn does a lot. Yeah. Because he and I were both working full time, and we were both kind of like hyping each other up, being like, "Oh, I'll leave if you leave," and now we've both ended up in the exact same industry, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like you're a good networker.
I think being likable and always putting in that extra. An extra 5 minutes at an event. Yep. Like I go to a lot of other events that I'm not necessarily working at. So whether that's run with any of the other retailers in Sydney, or any of the other Sony advocates, sometimes I'll go to those and, you know, I just hang back 5 minutes, help them pack down. I'm not being paid,
it goes a
long way. And I think when you're starting out as a beginner, not that saying no one should value your time, but you do have to, sometimes, unfortunately, you do have to do the work for free, especially if it's just to get the images that you then need to market. But at a base level, once you're already on set, my mindset is it doesn't matter how long it goes. So you've already committed to being there for 10 hours. What's 11? Yep. And that the extra hour, you might be unpaid. But for me personally, it's one of those things where like, the effort you put in that extra hour is going to show every single person in that room that you care about the project more than you care about the paycheck. People would, you know, if you're the person that goes and grabs someone a coffee, or you're the person who gets some food for everyone, whether you paid for it or not. If you're just the person that is treating everyone with respect and looking after everyone, all good in the hood. Like that's
they're going to remember you.
And they're going to remember you.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always really struggle because I get very stressed when I'm shooting for other people because I really feel the pressure.
Yep.
But, you know, if the client has a great experience and so do the rest of the crew, that is the most important thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
I agree, especially when it comes to like your reputation. A lot of people just look at what you're talking about, or what we were talking about earlier, is like your digital presence and your digital identity, right? What do I want to be identified?
My digital identity is so different to my actual identity.
Yeah, but it's something that you need to value just as much. A lot of people are like, I just need to put out bangers. And it's like, yeah, but you also like don't need to be a dick when you're on set. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's going to ruin
we're allowed
everything.
to swear on this podcast? Sick. All right. No. But yeah, I totally resonate with that.
Yeah,
like
it's just as important as the work that you put out.
Yeah. I think just going that little bit above and beyond, you know, I'm not saying anyone should be exploited in the industry.
Yeah,
but that little 5 minutes where you help someone pack something up, that extra bag you carry, that bottle of water you get for someone while they're busy.
Yeah.
So like those things just go such a long way.
True.
Because I'm not saying this in a selfish way, but say you're in the wedding industry and the DJ is really busy. They have to be on the decks. You've got 5 minutes. Nothing's happening that I need to shoot. You just take a water to that DJ. Who knows? You know, they might just the next time they're talking to a couple, they go, oh well, you know, I've got a list of photographers I've worked with before. Like this person's pretty cool. You might be on that list purely because of that experience.
That's true.
Nothing to do with the photos. The DJ might not have even seen the photos.
Yep. Well, they're like that Clyde guy. He was great.
Yeah,
guy.
they were good to work with.
Yep. Good energy.
But also just not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
like working in the wedding industry, because you're working with so many different creatives, sometimes there is a bit of a conflict, and you know, a bad experience will do severely more damage than just even a neutral experience.
That's so true, right? They
you
say
don't have
that
to
with
blow
reviews.
their socks off.
Yeah, you're right. Like someone will leave a negative review way more often than they would leave a positive review.
Absolutely. Like when you look at, say, a product on Amazon or like something, all the reviews will be negative because the people that had great experiences generally just don't comment because they got nothing to comment about.
True.
The product did what it was supposed to. That's all it needed to
exactly.
do. Why are you bothering with a review?
That's true. That's true. And I think it also is telling, if you're self-aware enough of the type of work you really are passionate about. Well, you know, when you're saying like there's so many different things that you can try and you don't know whether you're willing to do them or not.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to hang around an extra hour at the wedding photographer at the wedding, you probably don't want to do weddings. Whereas like if you really wanted to be the travel guy and you're at Antarctica, you're like, man, I will work as many hours as you want.
Yeah.
That shows that you love this. Like,
so on the Japan trip, my job was basically as a guide, but more so from the camera side. So there were two of us, Craig and myself. So Craig he's a really talented street photographer. So he was generally leading it, and I was there to just kind of like film some stuff and kind of help troubleshoot and like help people with the gear and stuff.
Yeah, cool.
But I took it upon myself and I was like, you know what? These people, it's all of their first time in Japan.
Yeah.
And I want to have a video of their trip finished by the time we fly out.
Yep.
So...
And something that you didn't have to do.
Something I didn't have to do, but the value that adds, yes, it was a couple of extra late nights and working on the at the airport and stuff. But when I look back at that, I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah.
I don't think about like, oh man, that was some late nights, or like, oh, I wish I'd got some more sleep.
Yep.
You look back at it and you're always like, oh, that was awesome.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. How'd you find Japan? I went to Japan for the first time.
Oh, really?
Too.
What did you think?
Amazing.
Everything's so flat.
Everything's so flat.
Yeah, we walked like 160 kilometers in like 5 days.
What time of the year did you go?
End of October, early November.
I went in the middle of summer.
Oh
my God. It was hard.
I've never sweat that much before.
Yeah.
And there's no bins anywhere. So you buy just so much water.
But it's so clean. There's no rubbish anywhere.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Everyone's just...
Yeah. And they're also like they're very accustomed to having cameras around as well. Like it was a predominantly street photography focused trip. So, but I know if you did that like somewhere else in the world, I feel like you'd have some pretty interesting interactions.
Yeah. Have you got any more trips coming up?
Going to Europe in August. Got a wedding in Portugal I've got to shoot.
Ooh. Yeah.
So that'll be fun. It's part of a larger trip that me and my partner are doing.
Awesome.
Just like a big holiday.
She's a creative as well?
Yeah, so she's my second shooter.
Epic. Oh, wow, that's so cool.
So when you were talking about like beginners as well, she's had such, like, I'm a bit salty because, and this is in no way like an egotistical thing.
Yeah.
But because she uses all of my gear. And because like I obviously like we share Lightroom, we share all of our like assets and resources. Cool. And then also like I go to most of her shoots and help and like, you know, I'm like a gaffer. I basically light it for her. And it's so good watching her develop and grow because it is like just having that extra stepping stone where you don't have to cross a lot of those early hurdles because you've got someone there to just troubleshoot.
Of course.
But then also like it's just fun seeing because she's off shooting like burlesque and pole. She like shoots pole, burlesque, wildlife. Awesome. So she's doing something really different than me. Which is exciting because then we're not kind of like competing over the same stuff.
That's cool. It's cool to have a partner that's like in the same, like you guys would be able to relate in so many different ways.
Yeah. So like ideally we'd love to just work and shoot together because she's a biologist / ecologist.
Oh, so, dude, this is like so what you guys ideally can do. There's so much potential here to just work together. And ideally,
she becomes the next David Attenborough, and I become the cam operator.
And you document the whole thing.
And I just shoot the whole thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Wow, cool, man. And yeah, these trips sound exciting. Is Europe through Sony?
No, that's just our own holiday we want to go on. But obviously it's nice if you're shooting a wedding over there. And
of course.
There's a couple of friends I got in Europe that I want to catch up with. One of the other Sony advocates, she's offering Iceland around that time. So I'm hoping to catch up with her. She's running a wedding workshop over there. So hopefully I can get there in time.
Iceland looks amazing.
Yeah, I've been once and I was only there for like 24 hours.
Oh yeah, you need to get back there.
Yeah, I flew in and hired a car because all I could afford was a car for 24 hours. And I drove the entire southern coastline, there and back again. Like left at 6 in the morning, did the whole coastline, and then had the car back by 9 a.m. the next day.
I want to make the most of every minute I have in this country.
Literally winding down the window and just shooting and then winding it back up again.
That's the best.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Sick. And workshops. Do you have any workshops coming up? Like people wanted to hang out with you and learn a bit?
I've got a couple coming up on Sony Scene. So I've got a studio creative shoot. So that's at Desk and Studio in Petersham.
Cool.
And then I've just got a couple of other like one-on-one sessions. So I run 6 free one-on-one sessions at some of the Sony stores around Sydney.
Yep.
And that's just like a come in and I will troubleshoot problems. We'll talk business.
Yep. Awesome.
Look at your website, see how it's going. If you want to try lenses, try some stuff, we'll just get it all out of the cabinets, have a bit of a play.
Epic.
It's really open-ended and I like that because, you know, someone might come in with being like, how do I do this one specific tiny little thing?
And I can just
nuts. and you see my eyes light up because I'm like, oh, sweet, I'll show you how to do it. Like, it's going to be awesome. But it's also just really rewarding for me as well because, you know, when you solve a problem for someone, again, back to that value thing. So I might not provide value on socials as much, but I really enjoy it when it's face-to-face. So it's, you know, someone wants to be like, oh, I switch from photo to video really often and I want to change this so that this doesn't affect this and my focus area doesn't change. I'm like, sweet. And I'll just like custom.
Got it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm playing a PlayStation controller with how quickly I do it. And you see them going, whoa. Yeah.
And then the with the workshops, do you just rock up? Do you book in?
Yeah, so it's all just on the Sony Scene platform. Cool. You just go on there. If you're not on there already, you just have to sign up. Ask for a bit of information about yourself, like what do you shoot? How often do you shoot? Would you consider yourself like enthusiast through to professional? And that kind of can help tailor some of those events to different people. But it's very open-ended. Like there's a whole team of us in Sydney. We've got Vienna, Joe, Robin, Brett, myself, Jay up in the Blue Mountains, and Ina down in Canberra. So that's kind of like the New South Wales.
And you guys collaborate a few times. Like I've seen you do things with Joe together.
Yeah. So Joe and I, because we live like relatively close together and we shoot similar genres, like we both do a lot of video. True. So we generally collaborate a bit more, but like Robin's great. She does a lot more landscape, wildlife. And then Brett does underwater. He's like the underwater king.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you want to learn about underwater photography, he is the guy.
Wow, that's super.
Jay's the astro guy. So if you're interested in landscape astro, he's the guy to hit up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very diverse.
And Vienna shoots like a lot of portrait events.
I did her mentorship when I first started out.
Really? That's awesome.
Man. Remember I told I felt like I was figuring things out on my own. I was frustrated, man.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
Years.
Years ago.
Years. When I first.
Yeah, she's a pro.
3-4 years ago. And that's why I think these workshops are so good, because none of this was around back then.
No.
And I was like, I just need someone. She popped up on my Instagram, and I'm like, cool, I will sign up to this. And he was like, oh, you got a call a week? I hijacked every call, like all my problems. Like I just build it up for a whole week because I had no one to talk to.
Yeah.
And you could tell she had like a structure of how she wanted the call to go.
Just hijacked
and,
the whole thing.
and I was like, Vienna, I had this happen. I don't know what to do with this client. What do I charge? And I just talk for an hour, and she'd just give me feedback. And he was like the only creative I knew that I could talk to.
Yeah, okay.
And then she'd be like, oh, time's up. And I'm like, cool, see you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah, it was great. So that's why I think these workshops are great. Like just being around other creatives, learning from people like you, but just hanging around other people.
Yeah.
It's so beneficial.
Yeah, there's so many people I see, especially that have come to workshops, and then I see kind of like the quality of their work just growing over time. And I'm like, yes, like I'm glad to be a part of that process.
Totally.
But then also like sometimes I run across people and I'm like, oh, you need to up your rate. Like I've seen your work. I know what you're capable of. Like if I believe in you and I trust you and your process, like you need to, you got to charge your worth as well. So,
and you need that feedback. It's so cool to be around people that actually understand, and they're like, because when you're on your own, you don't know.
No. You have no idea.
Yeah, you have no idea.
You deliver like the most above and beyond project to a client, and you think, oh wow, like that was so good, very happy. Yep. And the client's just like, oh man, we just rinsed this, we just rinsed this person.
He has no idea. Guys, come work with this dude.
Yeah, come work with this guy. Yeah.
Oh man, dude, this was great. This was so good.
Awesome.
I think you brought so much value. Everything that I thought. It's like
right,
same as Joe last week. I was like the perfect guest.
Right.
Like you guys are exactly what I'm trying to do. You reach these people. More people need to know about what you guys do. I get so much out of talking to you guys because we've all got so much to learn. So I appreciate your time.
More than happy to be here.
I look forward to seeing what else you got going on. These trips, and just the content you got from Antarctica. I'm like, dude,
I'm like that girl that gets back from Europe. Hot girl summer. And I'm just gonna keep posting it forever.
I can't wait to see it. Awesome. Thank you, dude.
No, thank you.
That was great.
Awesome.